Yeah, if anyone is on the website and looking and can't find it, let me know. We could always maybe go there after this. Okay, so this was a double rainbow day over at Greensprings, looking out over this is and north it's a northeast view. Well, we can just, yeah, there we go. Okay. So Greensprings is a 130-acre nature preserve surrounded by 8,000 acres of forest land. And our stewardship goals are pollinator habitat, grassland bird habitat, and in general, vibrant habitats. So we have a 10-acre woods, but it's almost all, oh, thank you. Look, this is an oversight of this is an overview of our entire property. So it's almost entirely meadowland. It's 120 acres of meadow. That little in the bottom left is our 10-acre woods. And we have 4 burial areas. The first one is over on the left. It's called West Meadow. Way back in 2006, Greensprings had its first burial, and it was in the West Meadow. And the West Meadow is, it borders the Arnott Forest. It has a section called sequential burial area. There's no other spot at Greensprings that has this. It's the one spot where your loved ones could plant a tree on your site. But it's also a spot where you don't get to have, you wouldn't go in like with your spouse or your sister or your best friend or whatever and get 2 sites side by side, because sequential is when your time comes, you have the next spot over. And then, the next person to die has the next spot over. So it's beautiful, and it's really, really good for someone who wants to have a tree at their site and isn't fussy about wanting to be like in a family or friend group. But if you want to be in a friend group or family, then you've got a lot of other options. West Meadow is also really diverse. When we take a tour, it's the most sort of uneven terrain. It's like a hill, and you're sort of slowly going down into a lower basin area. There's some trees. It's not all open meadowland, so it's theoretical that you could find a spot near a tree and or have like sort of a tucked away little spot. Whereas if we were going to the Bobolink Meadow, which is across the road, it's the top site, that's the triangle. That one is kind of all wide open, and it's named after the bobolink, which is this ground nesting meadowlark. And this is sort of it's like a classic story of how we manage our land. Bobolinks are these ground nesting birds that need, I think it's 13 or 18 acres of undisturbed space. And so across North America, their habitat is disappearing because of haying, because of the way people like to maintain their lawns, because of the loss of a hedgerow. There's a lot of different reasons that all the ground nesting birds are hurting, but bobolinks are tricky, especially because they require so much open meadowland. Well, they thrive here, and it's very fun in the spring. We lead bird hikes, and it's easy to go to any of our burial areas and see this beautiful black and white bird with a bright yellow cap. And the way that we manage our land is in part, and luckily just perfectly supports the type of management that they need. Okay, so we've done, it's almost up to 600 burials so far since our beginning in 2006. And more than 1,700 people are site owners. And yet we still have at least that many more sites available right now. Plus, when you look at this overall map, you can see that we have so much more room to expand. So we anticipate continuing to be an active burial cemetery for several hundred more years. Right, and you see that 13.8 of our total acreage is reserved right now. Lots of room. And it's not just that we've got room for burials, but we also prioritize Greensprings as a space for people to bring their grief to. So the Herb Engman Loop Trail, you see that pictured on this map. There's that little icon that has a frog, if you can see it. That's this beautiful little pond called the Reflection Pond. And further along that loop, this month, at the end of this month, we're going to be installing a wind phone, which was first created in Japan a couple decades ago, but it's like a physical phone, and this is hand carved out of locust wood, and it's like the type of phone that we all would have held when we were younger. And you it's an invitation to talk with the loved ones who have passed on. And we've got the Remembrance Grove, which is inside the West Meadow, which is particularly for people who lost children at any age. So it's for grieving parents and caregivers. But yeah, so there's a lot happening at Greensprings that is burials, but also grief and also nature appreciation. So we can go to the next slide. Aha, okay. So this is an image of what the burial looks like with some good statistics. But you see these people and they're pulling a cart, and there is a casket on top that's made of pine. So it's a fast growing softwood. It's locally available. Some basic guidelines for a Greensprings burial and for most natural burials is that we do it within 7 days of death. And that's respectful because the moment that we are dead, our body starts to just disintegrate. It's moving on. And so we do it within 7 days. And if you haven't yet thought about who your funeral director will be, most funeral directors at this point have done natural burial, but a good kind of test is, do they have a refrigerated unit? Some funeral directors, if they are not accustomed to natural burial, they're still doing a different thing where it usually takes place in an air-conditioned basement and they're embalming. And so they might not have a really suitable facility for someone who wants to do natural burial, or they'll be okay, but we'll do the burial quicker. But the most respectful thing is a refrigerated unit. So it's a good way to think about, who am I going to work with? And you can prepay a funeral director. So you could theoretically get all of it arranged while you're still alive. Okay, biodegradable casket or shroud. Oh, oops, I skipped this one thing that's really interesting and important. So burial, we'd go a depth of 3 feet because you go any deeper and there's not biological activity. So you're just decomposing much slower. And another piece of natural burial is this desire to return to the ecosystem. So at 3 feet, there's no animals that are going to be able to dig you up. It's much too deep for that to happen. And yet there's microorganisms, there's biological activity. That means you're going to compost. You're going to break down and return to the life cycle, Regarding biodegradable caskets or shrouds, so you see in this picture, the pine casket, but it's also possible to do a cardboard box, a seagrass basket, a willow casket, a shroud. There was once this beautiful burial. A woman was buried in what turned out to be, I didn't know it when I was looking at her, but it turned out to be her own bed sheet. It was peach colored and there were all these flowers on top of her. And the butterflies were like, oh my goodness. And so she had butterflies that were visiting the flowers. It was the most beautiful and turned out to be the least fussy thing I'd ever seen, And it was Kyle of Lansing Funeral Home, who we work with a lot, who had done that shroud. But yeah, so there's a lot of different options. And really the rule is just, it has to be biodegradable. And even though you could say like rosewood or mahogany, well, that's biodegradable, but it's also sourced from so far away. And it's these are rare hardwoods from a rainforest, so we like it to also be renewable and like sort of friendly, sustainable materials. Okay, and also no embalming fluids. Oh wait, there were 2 more things. There was no embalming fluids and no vault liner. So there's this crazy statistic about how much concrete goes into graves in North America in 1 year. It's something like we could go back and forth to the moon 7 times on a 4-foot wide sidewalk with all the concrete that goes into a grave liner. So in a conventional cemetery, there is this big concrete box that then the casket slides into. And the concrete box has a top on it, and that allows for mowing. So you can just mow flat spaces. And at Greensprings, they're not flat. You see a mound, and then that mound slowly settles. And we mow differently because we don't need that sort of golf course flatness. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, Green Burial Council. Actually, this is really a great resource. If you know anyone who's located further away and Greensprings just isn't realistic for them, you can go onto the Green Burial Council's website, and they have this map of all of North America. Put in where your friend lives, or put in any other place, and you'll find the nearest natural burial cemetery. But they are this certifying body that it's kind of like organic certification or something. It's just an organization that has created the rule system, and you can prove that you're following those rules by joining their organization. And they're great basic rules. So the definition of green burial is a way of caring for the dead with minimal environmental impact that aids in the conservation of natural resources, reduction of carbon emissions, protection of worker health, and the restoration and/or preservation of habitat. Green burial necessitates the use of non-toxic and biodegradable materials such as caskets, shrouds, and urns. Sometimes what you'll also see in a definition, it is here, the protection of worker health. It's worth noting that funeral directors have a far higher rate of cancer because of their exposure to embalming fluid. So yeah, so that's something, it's good on a lot of different levels. It's good because we're like treating our bodies. Actually, I guess an aside is that in Judaism, it's considered an abomination of the flesh to do embalming. And I just think with these little wonderful containers we've had that are getting us along as best they can, here I mean our bodies, like at the end, it'd be nice to be gentle with them, but the process of embalming is incredibly not gentle. There's quite a lot that goes into preparing us to appear as if we've just been sleeping. And it doesn't end up being good. It's not good for our bodies. It's not good for the land. It's not good for the funeral directors who do it. So green burial just points to a different way to do that. Okay, we could go to the next one. Aha, this is fun. Okay, so see, this is what it looks like at Greensprings. See that the people, these are family members who are serving as pallbearers. And pallbearing is, what happens when you've lost someone is that I think you find yourself looking for ways to sort of physically honor the person that you love. And with green burial, you get to in a couple different ways. You can pallbear, you can actually, I know that this is true with any type of burial, but with natural burial, you're often welcome to work with the funeral director if you wanted to wash your loved one, or dress your loved one. There's just a lot of opportunities to normalize death and to grieve in a way where you're in action with your grief. Another piece of Greensprings is that you can plant on the top of your loved one's mound, which is just another way to visit, and talk and say hello and like physically honor the person that you've lost. So why people choose natural burial? It's eco-friendly. It's less pollutive than conventional alternatives. I should say that it's less polluting also than cremation, which is it's just a huge percentage across the world of people are choosing cremation. But cremation is better than conventional burial. And then there's a thing called aquamation, which is far better than cremation, that is hopefully going to be passed in New York State, but it might take a decade or two. And then, of course, you probably also heard of human composting. And that is something that's technically available in New York State, but not actually available in New York State. And it's going to be more expensive than conventional burial, which is easily like $10,000. And it amounts kind of, because the remains have to be brought to a cemetery, it amounts to just natural burial, except you've sped up the process offsite, and then you deliver the the composted remains to a cemetery. So anyway, green burial is also cost effective. It's far less expensive than conventional burial, and it's just a little bit more expensive than cremation. And it's easy to plan. So, and I guess, I've seen some burials that were very planned, but there's so much flexibility, and it's an invitation to organize it the way you want. Families tend to be in charge of how they want the service to go. And there have been some where people just stood, like there was one not so long ago where a husband was burying his wife and they had 2 young children. And he just, at one point, it was all just silence. And then he said, "I'm so sorry, I should have been able to prepare something." And everyone was just like, "No, it's okay, we get it." And everyone was just sort of sad and quiet together. And then there's others where there's someone who's going to sing a song, and other people brought poems, and someone is like, people go around telling stories, they're just sort of taking turns telling stories about what they remember about this person. But what happens when you're outdoors at a natural burial is that there's a lot more sharing than frequently takes place when you're inside a funeral home and there's a funeral director maybe leading it, who possibly, or a pastor or something, who possibly never knew your family member or you very well. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, what it looks like. So we see all these people coming in from afar, and our meadow is mowed. So that means that this is probably early spring. We mow all of our burial areas late fall every year. But then by the time you get to, say, right now, the goldenrod or the purple asters are like waist high at least, but we've still got these mowed pathways. So anyway, here we are. It's burial day. It's obviously late spring, and we've got this grave open, and then we've got the long boards and 2 cross boards. And in the background, you can see a family is pulling the cart, and there's a casket on the cart. So the family and friends are serving to pull the cart along, and people are standing on both sides, and they're all following. The kids have raced down to see what it looks like inside. Well, inside, there are evergreen boughs lining the bottom. And you can see that there are evergreen boughs up at the head and at the feet, like equal to, on the same level as the ground. And if this were the summer, then we would have picked wildflower bouquets, and they'd be at the head and feet. And sometimes people bring flowers. So we can look at the next slide, and we'll keep looking at what this looks like. Okay. Oh my goodness. The image on the left shows a winter burial, and you can see that the mom, there's in this picture, there's the mom who's being buried and her daughter, and then her daughter. So it's, the grandma or the mom, depending on which woman you're asking. But we do burials all time of year, and we've never had a problem opening up the earth. And yet, if we did, we have this earth warming machine that we can set on top of the ground. But the earth that comes out of the ground to open the grave is put to the side, and we line that with evergreen boughs. And then we have shovels, and then we bring the person down using the cart, and then move the person off of the cart and onto the crossboards. And here in this one on the left, you can see that it's a cardboard box, and they've opened up the box because the daughter wanted one last look at her mom. And they're just having this private communion and saying goodbye. And then soon after, we close the box back up. And in this particular burial, it was pretty I mean, they're all really special, but they put little biodegradable sort of presents to her in the grave. And that's not unusual. Sometimes people will put little letters to the person that they love, but it's all biodegradable. And then we get the straps, and you can see one of the green straps is wrapped around the cardboard box. We all stand, and it's 3 people on each side. And if no one from the burial party can be a pallbearer, then our crew will be a pallbearer, because we always have a 4-person crew, but if needed, we'll have a 6-person crew. And then we gently lower the person down into the grave. and now it's their casket or their shroud, and they're on that bed of evergreen boughs. And then we invite people to put shovels of earth in. And actually, again, in Judaism, there's this tradition to use the shovel upside down. So it's not a scoop. It's like sort of domed up. So it makes it harder to get the earth onto your shovel. And that's kind of the point. The point is it's very hard to say goodbye to people that you love. So, you don't have to do that. Jewish people do. And then sometimes other people do just because they know, and it's like, yeah, that's a good symbol of how heartbreaking this is. But people put shovelfuls of earth in if they want to. People put flowers in. Oh my goodness, there was this one burial where someone had written a gratitude every day, and he would just put it in this jar. And when he was buried, at his burial, his wife brought the jar and passed all those gratitudes out and asked us all to read one of his gratitudes. And there were some simple things like put in a load of laundry today, or she came back with flowers and I planted them, or whatever. It was just little pieces of a life, but it was just we all got to read this, and it seemed like it conjured the whole man, and we were just, I don't know, we were just really summoning him. Actually, he had something sort of not rude really, but he said something about someone who was there, and she was like, oh, that's me. He said something like, I think I finally see why DG is so controlling, or something like that. Anyway, we just all had a good laugh. But so now this mound on the right hand side, this isn't what it looks like when it's mounded up after the burial. This is people banking their the bouquets of flowers into the dirt that will later go back into the grave. And so people do their shovelfuls. Every now and again, a family or friends will shovel the entire amount of earth back into the grave. But typically we have a backhoe and we gently close the grave up. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, oh, see, now this gives you a better sense. This is probably July. We've got a lot of buttercups and no goldenrod yet. And people are just, hanging out in the meadow, being sad together. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is more about how we manage the land. I told you about how we mow all the burial areas every fall, but then that still leaves another, 60 some acres that we need to, 70 acres that we need to mow. And we do that. We do 1/3 of that every 3 years. And that's so that we can keep it as meadowland, because otherwise it would just revert to forest. And this is a picture of what we call Monarch Meadow. And this is right around now, a couple of years ago, and it's looking north. Okay, and then also it says families are invited to plant native plants on their loved one's burial mound. Well, we also just hired a land steward, and we've been doing this pilot project where he's been planting on people's burial mounds if that's what the family wants. And it's a partnership with Mundy Wildflower Garden at Cornell and the Finger Lakes Native Plant Society. And it's going really well. And I should say that actually, in terms of our organization, it's convenient that we've got Cornell located so close to us, because we have ornithologists and apiarists, plant specialists. We have this sort of, it's called the Ecological Advisory Committee. We have this group of very intelligent folks who help make sure that we're staying true to our nature preserve mission. And when in doubt, we can ask them. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Oh, hey, this is the very last one. And this is part of the Herb-Engman Loop, which is this fun, I think it's less than a mile. It's just a great loop. And here's a person just sitting, enjoying. We also do a art class every summer. And we are going to do Greenery Day, which is this time, it's like a December celebration where people can get a little Christmas tree. But yeah, there she is, just basking in the sun and enjoying it. Actually, just beyond her, up at that ridge that doesn't look like it's very high, That's one of the tallest points in Tompkins County. And standing there at Leopold Overlook, you can see it's a 90-mile view into the endless mountains in Pennsylvania. So it's a fun place for just coming and visiting. Okay, I could take any questions. Yep. Wait, get your mute off.
What about markers? Can you talk about those?
What a good question. I should have included a picture of that. Okay, so our burial areas, each burial site is 15 by 15 feet. So that's quite large, especially when you think in a conventional cemetery, they're about 3 by 8. Well, 15 by 15 is consistent with conservation burial because you're just trying to be gentle on the land. When you're at Greensprings, you will see these upright markers that have a slanted, I don't think it's made of cedar. I think, okay, well, anyway, this, it's got this wooden sort of slanted thing. And then on the face of it is going to be a letter and a number. Each one of those marks one corner of a 90 by 90 grid. So it's like up at that corner, up in the northeast corner, that would be site number 1. And then it goes along sort of typewriter style for 6 sites. So, so the best thing I can say is that we have GPS coordinates for every site, because otherwise it can be a little bit tricky to go visit a friend unless you know, oh, they were right next to that tree, or they're right by this path. Or, and we're always happy to do this, we can meet people out there and walk them to the site, or we mark it ahead of time, we draw a map, and we've got those GPS coordinates. But as you stroll along, no one has to install a stone necessarily. And so we are all just kind of going back into the environment, you know, and so it can be tricky unless you have any of the different things, the interventions and the support that we try to provide, so that it is easy to find a loved one. And I see someone said, how much are the plots? Okay, each site is $1,000. And the burial service fee, which can't be prepaid to us, but can be prepaid to a funeral director, is $1,200. And our only other charge, and this is optional, is the stone installation, which is $100. We have stones that that we've unearthed that are for free, and we could mark it with your name, but we wouldn't do it until after you've passed. So really, it's going to be someone else from your family who chooses your stone. Although you could think about what you want the stone to say. But we have stones there. There's one that says "She kicked ass." That's all it says. And there's another one that says "Queen of the Universe." And there's other ones that have like a piece of a poem and the person's name, date of birth, date of death. Like it kind of runs the gamut, but they can't exceed 400 square inches. So none of them are too big, but that's a fairly large. That's a pretty large stone. Yeah. Oh, and regarding the cost, another thing, I guess this is actually more of a land use thing, but on a 15 by 15 site, we're allowed to do one full body burial in the center. But if someone wanted to be cremated and they were like in your family circle, it's possible to bury their cremains also on your site. And a cremation site, we also have just regular cremation sites, which are 7.5 by 7.5 feet. A cremation site is $450. And the burial service fee for that is $550. And we haven't raised those prices. We haven't raised the cost of sites, I don't think, since 2017 or so. And we don't have intention of raising them anytime soon. We did just raise the burial service fees by $100 for both of those. But when you think about what you're not buying, the concrete vault, the fancy casket, it ends up being, I guess, usually half the cost of a conventional burial. And another thing about cost is that it's a rule that every funeral director has to give you basically a menu. It has to be an itemized list of the costs. So you won't just hear one total and find out that 6 unnecessary things are crammed into that total. So there's a lot that you wouldn't be charged for in a natural burial. Other questions?
This is a brand new thought for me. My interest in a stone would be largely genealogical.
Hmm.
Um, and it occurred to me, you have a book with a record of where everybody is. Do you ever put an inscription in the book rather than on a stone?
So we have a book in the, well, in the next 5 years or so, we're going to have a visitor center. But right now we have what we call the office. And you walk inside what is really just a shed, but it's not like gross or dirty or anything. And you can open this book and you can find your loved one's name and you can see their date of birth, date of death, and where their site is located. So sort of yes.
So would there be room there for a short line, like the she kicked ass kind of thing?
No, not unless we
Okay,
were to do it differently.
okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So we can just go up and wander around anytime we want, scope it
Yep.
out, sit on the path,
Yeah,
look up over
absolutely.
90 miles.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've gotten really good at improving our signage so that you can feel like you know where you're going. I remember going there with my now 18-year-old before I even considered working there, and I pulled in and I couldn't tell where to go, but there was one sign. And so I walked toward that one sign. But now, as you drive along, you're going to see an entrance. You're going to see Harrier Meadow entrance, and that's our newest burial area. You're going to see a sign for Bobolink Meadow. If you pull into the main entrance, you'll see this kiosk that'll show you an overall map and where you are. And that's a great place to start. So you don't take the first left into the Harrier Meadow entrance, just drive a little bit further, take the next left and park in our visitor parking, and then look at that kiosk. And you can start from there and do the Herbangman Loop, walk up to the Leopold Overlook, do the perimeter trail in the West Meadow. I don't actually have it all measured out yet, but we've got miles worth of trails there. But the Herbangman Loop is just 0.6 miles. And there's not a big gain. Or if you knew you only wanted to get that great view, you could park at Harrier Meadow and just follow the signs to Leopold Overlook.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a map online?
I kind of think that we don't. So the website is, well, okay, so we turned 18. And it just feels kind of like we are 18, like we were just young and now we're starting to get adultish. And so there's a lot more coming together. Financially, we're an extremely strong organization, but we weren't always, we're just this fledgling thing run almost exclusively by volunteers and one paid staff person. But now we have 6. And so anyway, that's a goal that we will achieve, but we don't have yet. I could send to Leslie, who could send to you an overall map so that you could have it and print it out. Yeah. Okay. I'll do that at the end of this. To the Cornell email address, Leslie.
You mentioned that one could plant something on the grave.
Yeah.
But it sounds as though whatever you plant there, you've got to keep in mind it's going to get mowed. It's going to be mowed.
Yeah.
So that dramatically limits what you really could put there, at least within a 3-year period.
So flowers, not shrubs.
Well, yeah, no shrubs unless you are down in the sequential burial area. But when we know that there are new plantings, we have one staff person who goes out every fall and marks every single planting, and the mowers go around it.
Oh.
So yeah, our burial area mowing is it's really precise. It's done in-house by volunteers. And then we use a brush hog to mow our non-burial area. But we're on the mower or we're using a weed whipper, but we do our best to be extremely considerate because, you're not just planting flowers, you're also communing with your loved one. And it's like this message to them that I was here, that I love you. So we take all that into account and try to do a really good job of supporting people's visits to their loved ones.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
There is a Jewish tradition of putting stones on a headstone
Yep.
to say, I was here. I'm
Yeah.
assuming you don't want any stones put in the meadow.
Well, we are okay with that. It just, they have to be very small. You know, the
Mhm.
mower blade is lifted, I think it's about 4 inches, maybe it's a little bit
Okay.
higher. So we aren't nicking any little stones, but you can't put out big ones.